Good evening, everyone present here in Facebook and YouTube Live. This is Rudranarayan Das. Take this opportunity to privilege uh, to welcome everyone to World Human Sciences and Management Conference 2021 and 22. I'm sorry, and because of there is some problem in my device, so I do not open my camera. Let us start the meeting. Um, Invitations to global dialogue on an agnotological context, disciplinary practices of social sciences and policy frames, an initiative towards think tanks and rethink episteme. Distinguished participants, partakers, it's a glorious moment to extend uh, my warm wishes on behalf of Center for Adivasi Research and Development at this international conference. Uh, you know that try to build with the intent of active and interactive learning and discussion organized by Center for Adivasi Research and Development in collaboration with Indian Institute of Management Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha Koraput, and Ravenshaw University Cuttack. On behalf of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude to our patrons, Professor Sanjay Kumar Naik, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Ravenshaw University, Professor Mahadev Jaiswal, Honorable Director, IIM Sambalpur, and Professor Sarath Kumar Palita, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Central University of Odisha. The convener of this largest virtual conference, eminent Indian historian, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda, and eminent policy activist, writer, and philanthropist, Mr. Charudat Panigraiji. Dear friends, the main outcome of this conference is to come up with national and international framework for the education system in future. The crux of this conference will be the use of digital technologies such as artificial intelligence and augmented reality and virtual reality that is being increasingly adopted after the outbreak of COVID pandemic. We hope this conference would help students, faculties, researchers, and all to expand their mental horizon and help the education system to adopt the best in future. Ladies and gentlemen, our center is a leading research-oriented institution promoting ethnographic, empirical, and evidence-based research for engaging and addressing the challenges that 21st century globe is facing today. The prime agenda of this institution is to come up with potential policy solutions for social change while believing in the idea of debate, dialogue, discussion, uh, and expertise, experiencing, and education. The institution focuses on marginalized communities and works for their livelihood to protect the nature, culture, language, and identity in particular. The age of modernity has witnessed that change is the only constant phenomena for societal purpose to enhance knowledge. Our information work for them is methodical and avoids paradoxically frameworks which is neglected so many centuries from theory to become practice. Our center sincerely believe in the concept of social marketing, which is seriously looking for non-profit marketing and builds new social entrepreneurship for check and balance mechanism to glorify generations to come. Center for Adivasi Research and Development come to serve with the holistic approach of critical thinking in education to fill the gaps and to plan accordingly for the voiceless communities. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me tremendous contentment to introduce the most esteemed personality of today's symposia is none other than Dr. Punyashree Panda. Dr. Panda is a professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Bhubaneswar, Odisha. Uh, Let me introduce Dr. Panda. Dr. Panda works as assistant professor in the Department of English in IIT Bhubaneswar. Dr. Panda comes with more than 18 years of teaching and research experience. She has more than 35 national and international research papers and book publications to her credit. She won the prestigious WISC Summer Residential Fellowship in 2014, the first and only Indian to have won it so far. The same year, she also won the IWL Fellowship offered by Harvard University, United States. In the last 15 years, Dr. Panda has trained both academia and industry personnel in India and abroad. Dr. Panda's current areas of interest include the post-colonial world literature, cross-cultural communication, ecofiction, and memory studies. Dr. Panda's in-depth article titled Indigenous Humour in Thomas King's The Back of the Turtle, an eco-critical perspective, published by Penn State University Press, appeared in Studies in American Humor in 2020. So welcome, ma'am, to World Human Sciences and Management Conference 2022, organized by Center for Adivasi Research and Development. Your topic is, as suggested by you, is that the green humor from around the world, which will be definitely be an eye-opening session for all of us. Thank you for accepting our invitation and say your ideas in this international forum. I would like to stop here and invite Professor Panda to start her talk. Over to you, Professor Panda.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you for your kind introduction. And I wish I could see all of you, because I'm not seeing any of you. It feels like I'm talking to a blank screen. We're just talking about how the whole gamut of technology is taking over human life. And I wish I could see your faces. And if we meet someday in the physical world, I would know that this is the person we met in this conference. And I'm very appreciative of the work that CAR is doing. Dr. Jena has been in touch for a long time, and he keeps on telling all the good work that you people are doing. So congratulations to you for that. And I hope that the good work continues, and that you find new avenues to give voices to the voiceless, as you have already mentioned. So, Dr. Jena, do I keep the camera on or should I switch it off? How do you prefer it?
Please continue, madam. Please continue.
Okay. Yeah. So, this idea of green humor, before we start sharing this the discussion and going ahead, I just wanted to tell you that this idea is pretty new, and this came very recently. So let me just start to share my screen. Okay, I believe that my screen is being shared and that you can see my slides. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, please.
So we're talking about green humor from around the world, and so when I propositioned to talk about this, I thought that I'll talk about green humor, and this seemed to be a very timely discussion, because we are still in the middle of a pandemic. The pandemic is not officially over, and just as we were battling the pandemic, we are now in the middle of a heat wave, and in between there were a couple of cyclones that came and went by. So life is not easy these days, because the climate is changing, and a lot of what is happening because of what we are doing to the world, to the planet. So green humor originates from that whole lived experience of the planet changing, how the planet is changing. When we were younger, when we were in school, how our summer vacations used to be and how it is now. There's a huge difference between the way we experienced life when we were younger and the way our children experience life. They are, a lot of times, they are not even keen to go out, because it's either very hot, or it's either hot, or it is cold, or it's raining, or there is a cyclone about to come, or there is a pandemic lurking from the back. So it's all of this together brings us to the idea of green humor. We know that this is a tough time. We know that we have more tough times coming ahead. So how do we deal with it? How do we deal with all of this, all of this tragedy that strikes us in regular intervals these days? And that's where the idea of green humor came from. So I would start with a reference to the three theories of humor. I believe that many of the participants here and those who are on other platforms such as Facebook would be familiar with these theories. But just to refresh your memories, I would bring forward these three theories, the traditional theories of humor. There are many theories actually that are doing rounds for the last couple of decades, but I'm just focusing on the primary, the traditional theories of humor. The first one that actually came into being was the superiority theory, which was propounded by Aristotle in the early days of philosophical notings. So the oldest of all theories of humor is supposed to be the superiority theory. So the superiority theory talks about how humor originates from the misfortune of others. Remember, when you were a child, you probably got a glimpse of the Charlie Chaplin shows or the Lauren Hardy shows, and it was always like somebody is being troubled. There was a trouble, and you would always feel like, oh, what a buffoon that is. Oh, what a fool that person is to slip on a banana peel or to enter into a hot chamber, something like that. So it was a theory. This whole idea of physical humor, where people are laughing because they are seeing somebody else in trouble, originates from the idea of the superiority theory. So the theory, superiority theory, talks about how we find laughter, how we find humor, how it is comic for us to see somebody else in trouble, not because the other person is in trouble that makes us laugh, but because the other person's trouble makes us feel superior. We feel superior when we see somebody else doing something that we do not approve of, or we do not think we will be ever caught doing. All right. So that's how the superiority theory operates. Even Thomas Hobbes talks about the superiority theory in the sense that he says that this is an outcome. Humor is always an outcome in any situation when there is a sudden realization that the other person that you are watching, that the subject that you are watching is a buffoon, is lesser than you. So that is where all this superiority theory functions. So a lot of humor that you probably would feel as inappropriate at this point of time in human history originated from superiority theory. Right. Then the next one is the incongruity theory. So the incongruity theory says that there is something very, very striking, very, very startling about two or three things that plan to connect and they fail. So in a sense that everything that does not fit falls into the category of the incongruous. So you do not expect it to happen. You do not expect this to happen. So there was this, this colonial times joke, the British Raj time joke that I remember. So there is this young Indian man who is invited for a dinner at a Englishman's residence in India during the Raj, and there is a bottle of beer that's opened, and then all of the beer it's cold and it comes out, and all the froth comes out. It becomes very frothy. So he's amused. This Indian man is amused, and he says, "Oh well, how did it happen?" So the British host asks him, "What happened? What happened?" So he says, oh no, I'm just seeing the bottle and I'm assuming how could this all come out, all this froth. So the British man tells him that, well, that's how it happens with alcohol. When you open it, it's frothy, so it comes out. So he says, oh no, I'm not bothered about the coming out part. I'm just wondering how it went inside, how you kept it in. Right. So the whole idea that this Indian man is not familiar with the beer coming out from the bottle and falling all over is what strikes as the joke, as the comic situation, as a comic context. So that is where the incongruous comes to play. So somebody's somebody's wearing something that is not appropriate for a situation. Somebody's talking something that's not appropriate for the situation. All of this can cause humor. So that is where incongruity plays a role. So things that are profoundly discordant, profoundly misfitting into a situation, startling in a sense, can be a reason of what you can term as funny. Right. That's the incongruity theory for you. And then Freud came up with the relief theory, which probably I would say is one of the more easier theories to comprehend. So Freud was of the opinion that every event that is humorous, or every chance of humor, is a chance to release some energy, release some psychic energy or psychosomatic energy. So Freud and other theorists who believe in the relief theory came up with the idea that some build-up tension is the resting point, is the requirement for all humorous circumstances. So there has to be something pent up, there has to be something inside, and then when you look at it, you just burst out laughing. All right. So that is what the relief theory tells you. The relief theory tells you that if you are interested in laughing, if you are interested in talking about a situation where people are to laugh, that means you are interested in releasing some kind of a pent-up energy, some kind of a tension that comes up. And this is striking in a sense that how Freud could assume of the business of life as such, in the sense that if you want to be happy, if you want to be laughing at something, you want to be feeling good about a particular context, in the sense that you smile or you laugh only when you feel good about it, you have to have some kind of a pent-up energy to release. So the release is what causes the laughter. All right, that's what Freud told about. So there are other theories that have come up, but I wanted you to just focus on these three primary theories, which is, if you know these three theories, you are good to go. You can actually make sense of most jokes, and most jokes can be fit into either one or two or all three of these theories. So that way, this makes sense to talk about the three theories of humor before we go ahead and talk about what is green humor. Right. Okay. So and then I thought of telling you about the more recent developments in terms of humor and how humor is perceived as humane. So humor is humane. Human. If you want to talk about something humane, if you want to make bonds that's humane, you probably would depend on humor. So Bergson, as recently as 1980s, Bergson came up with a wonderful essay by the name Laughter. And one line that strikes from this essay is, the comic does not exist outside of what is strictly human. So Bergson says that the comic makes sense because it is human. If you want to talk about how to create a joke, if you want to talk about what makes somebody else laugh, focus on what's human. Focus on what is relevant in human life. And this, if we draw it a bit further, we can say that because it is so very human, because humor is so dependent on human ability to laugh and human ability to comprehend situations, humor can also serve as a social remedy. It can serve as a tool for consciousness, as a way to look at things more positively, and it can enable people to be aware of behaviors that are hostile to human prosperity. Now, there is this whole debate. In fact, the whole thing is about who believes or who doesn't believe in climate change. Now, the question of not believing in climate change does not exist, because there is enough scientific evidence to support that climate change is happening, that it is already on the roll, and we have almost lost the plot. But this is bad news, right? This is bad news, that climate change is something that is no more going to come back, that it has gone to the state of irrevocability, is something that it is now almost out of your control, but you can still laugh at it. That's what Burson is talking about. And then Max Eastman talked about the enjoyment of laughter in his beautiful book, The Enjoyment of Laughter, in 1936. He says that we come into the world endowed with an instinctive tendency to laugh and have this feeling in response to pains presented playfully. So Eastman was of the opinion that the whole idea of laughter, the whole purpose of humor is to look at pain and to be able to laugh at it. So this is a very fitting definition for what we would propose as green humor. So we come into the world because we have this tendency to laugh. We can laugh at even our pain. So that is what Eastman talked about. So Eastman was, I would say, one of the early propounders of what now can be perceived as, as a means to define green humor. So Eastman observes that humor and play both can occur, and they occur especially when the attitude towards what is sometimes looked as a serious matter. Climate change, when you talk about climate change, it's a serious matter. It's tragic. It's taking lives. It's changing the planet. But it's also, it's also man's ambitions, our own self-deceptions that have caused climate change. It's the anthropocentric idea of life is what has brought us to this. All right, but this does not take away the possibility of humor from climate change. It's sometimes, is climate change funny? If you ask the question, is it funny? Is it funny? No, it's not funny. It's tragic. But the idea is that to be able to laugh at what's tragic can potentially help us create forums for dialogue and create tools for awareness, create platforms to address the whole issue of climate change. And then these new theorists like Berlant and Guy and Osmus, they have talked about how comedy can draw attention to the hypocritical, what's false and pretentious. So us talking about climate change but sitting in an air-conditioned room is pretentious. Us talking about climate change when we are using technology for our everyday life, for everyday purposes, is incongruous. The whole incongruity of the situation is that we're talking about climate change while we're using, inordinate amounts of fossil fuel every day just to travel to office, travel to the market, to meet a friend. We do not mind spending exorbitant amount of money on traveling to long distances. So that is incongruous. So this is something that we do not really follow. We are talking about climate change, but we do not really follow what comes or what needs to be done. And that incongruity can be laughed at. We can laugh at our own selves and look at how to go about managing climate change from here, if at all we can manage it. All right. And Osner says that comedy can will power to destabilize and threaten fundamentalist thought and practice through more nuanced and conditional interpretations of truth. So that small but very influential population of humanity, which does not believe in climate change, is also the one that has the most money. You know, the whole idea of climate change, it's probably negated by big corporate houses, by industries like dependent on fossil fuel industries like coal and oil and all of that. So this is going to be very tough when you're talking about handling or managing climate change, and you are talking about it in a fun way, in a humorous way. How is it going to be integrated? Is it going to make the whole process of talking about climate change, if we depend on humor, is it going to make it frivolous? Is it going to make it something trivial? Is it going to not bring the results that we assume would be brought by using humor? But then it's a risk that is worth taking. Now we have taken a lot of risks for our enormous greed, and because of our our gluttony, we have done extreme damage to the planet that we live in, and it is probably now payback time. So why not depend on humor? Humor has worked a lot of times. If you look at human history, you will find that a lot of times it was humor that saved the day. It was humor that helped people go forward in life. Especially if you look at indigenous cultures from across the world, you will find that they have lived with humor, and they have lived with humor in spite of what has happened to them in the last 400 years. So probably humor is a way to deal with something as sad, as tragic, and as immediate and as intimate as climate change. So this is why I'm talking about the whole idea of green humor, where you can talk about climate change in what looks like a trivial tone, what looks like a frivolous tone, to ensure that it cuts through the whole population, that people become aware of the damage that is being caused, and that we probably can give ourselves a better planet. Okay, so humor as a tool for serious talk has enough evidence in terms of research evidence. There has been enough number of studies conducted in the 1980s, 2000s, and more recently in 2015, 16. There are these projects going on, Stand Up for Climate Change, and then Into the Greenhouse. All of these have talked about how humor can work as a tool for serious talk, because people remember information better when they perceive that information to be humorous. Remember, if you are a teacher, if you have been teaching in a class, you would do well to use humor in the classroom. If you use humor in the classroom, your students will be more interested, and they will remember what you were talking about more clearly than if you do not use humor. All right, this whole phenomenon is called as a humor effect, and the primary benefits of humor effect are enhanced interest, enhanced energy levels, and a sense of positive reassertion. So if you're talking about climate change and you're using humor, you probably are on the right path. You probably are going to make sense to some people. If this works, this might be our last resort. This might be the way we touch the larger populace to talk about what can be called as a climate communication, what can be termed as climate awareness communication or climate communication, right? Okay. Now, I just wanted you to have a slice of, how scientific climate change narrative goes. So, you know that IPCC is coming up with, this annual reports about climate change. So it refers to the average rise in Earth's temperatures. This is one thing, because this is the most pertinent of it all, because we are experiencing it on an everyday basis in everyday life. So last summer was probably 45. This summer is 47. Next one probably will be 49. That's how it is going on. So the IPCC also has told that global warming is a reality, and the evidence for global warming is unequivocal, which means that there is no doubt that the globe is warming, that our planet, the planet Earth is heating up, that we are creating a hot chamber for all of us and our children, and there is no way this is going to stop. All right. So, and it's more than 90% certain that most of the global average warming over the past 50 years is a result of human activity. So, greenhouse gas emissions caused by industries, caused by. Okay? Somebody wants to ask a question. Do we? Right. Should we continue?
No, ଘରେ ଅଛି ଏଠି ମାରିଲେ ଘରେ ଅଛି।
Okay, should we go ahead? Okay, shall we continue, Dr. Jena? Dr. Das? Right, I assume that we need to continue. So there are all these possibilities with climate change, melting glaciers, melting ice caps, melting sheet ice, rising sea levels, changing rainfall, drinking water crisis, more number of diseases, more frequent drought, more frequent heat waves, more frequent cyclones. You name it, you get it. But this is a very, apocalyptic way of looking at climate change. And we know that this is probably heading to apocalypse, but there is a way to deal with it. And that way is probably humor, right? So this is how climate change is being communicated to the masses for a longest time. This whole idea of talking to the masses about climate change has been there for more than 50 years, and it still doesn't make sense to a lot of people, because people assume this to be something untrue, something that is concocted, something that is fabricated, but that's not true. And we know that there is enough scientific willingness to talk about and to present us with the right number of data and statistics to prove that climate change is on the roll, that it is happening. But it has not made much of an impact on the masses. So how do we reach the masses? And unless we reach the large number of populace, we probably will not make sense, and people will not be aware to to accept this whole truth of this reality of the contemporary times, that climate change is real and that we have to do something, even if it's a small thing, even if it's a small step towards a greener planet. We should be doing it. And this is how this is where the role of humor comes to play. All right. And why am I naming it as green humor? If you Google green humor, you will find nothing except one book by Rohan Chakravarti, which was which came up in 2018, where he talks about that's the more like graphic idea of what is happening. So Chakravarti talks about all of this climate change in a graphic art form. He uses cartoons to talk about this. Rather than that, you won't find green humor. So this is a term that I'm proposing to be used for climate change humor. So currently the term that is being used is climate change humor. Probably we can say green humor, because that reminds us of our responsibility towards a greener planet, and that could also be an extension of what is now known as green fiction. So this makes sense that we can probably say it as green humor. So this is where I'm talking about green humor. So why green humor? And then before why green humor, you might ask, well, before we talk about why green humor, what is green humor? So humor as such is a very tough word to define. Humor is, as many definitions as you can imagine to yourself. So humor is, everybody's sense of humor is unique, and we can say that humor is something that cannot be boxed. We cannot box it in a definition. So in spite of having all these theories, in spite of having these recent comprehensions of how humor functions, we probably are at a loss to come up with a definitive idea about what is humor. But we know that humor is something that makes you laugh, that makes you feel comfortable at times and feel uncomfortable at other times. And when we're talking about green humor, this is more likely to make people feel uncomfortable than comfortable. So this is going to be uncomfortable. Green humor is not going to be nice. It is not going to be a goody two shoes kind of humor. It's not going to be bringing you happy memories from bygone era. It's going to be tough. It's going to make you feel uncomfortable. And in that sense of discomfort, are you going to discover a way to be alive, a way to survive, a way for resilience? All right. So climate change, we know, is here and now, and it is immediate, and it is not something that can be denied anymore. It's a collective global concern. You cannot say, well, I live in this part of the world, so climate change does not affect me. That's not true. Climate change is going to affect every single country. In fact, I'm reminded of Amitabh Ghosh, statement where he says that every country, rich or poor, is going to be impacted by climate change. All right. So if we just put it in our own words, it will be all of humanity, irrespective of their socio-cultural, geographical, or political background, is bound to experience climate change. You are not immune to climate change, no matter where you are on planet Earth. And that is where humor can play a role, because it binds humanity like never before. Brings us to this whole idea of being one self, being one species on planet Earth. And you would probably agree with me if I say that we often deal with the most painful parts of our lives through humor. So it is probably a good idea to go about talking about climate change through humor. All right. So the idea is very simple. The plan is very basic here, because we talked about humor, and then we talked about what potentially can be green humor. I'm going to just familiarize you with some samples of what is potentially green humor. So I'm going to share with you some pictures, images, and then some snippets, videos, and a couple of interesting books that I came across, which can be categorized as green humor books. So this is the whole idea, because I assume that many of you probably are aware of climate change, but are you aware of climate change humor? And if you are aware of, that's very nice. But if you're not, then you should know where to go and find what kind of humor works when we're talking about green humor. So the idea is that for the rest of the discussion, I'm going to familiarize you with different, different kinds of media that is using green humor, and this is how we are going about it. So before we go for that, I would like to focus a bit more on recent research on the impact of humor on the climate change narrative. So as recently as 2015 and 2017, Brewer and McKnight have talked about, how viewing satirical content on the issue of climate change from sources like The Daily Show, The Koraput Report, and Last Week Tonight with Don Oliver can help you expand or substantiate your views about climate change and the belief in a scientific consensus towards global warming, especially for people who are not interested in the whole climate change issue. All right. And then Anderson Baker in 2018, they found that one-sided ironic humor can positively influence belief certainty in and perceived risk of climate change, especially if viewers are less likely to rate climate change issue as important, which means both studies we take together, they say that if climate change is introduced to people through humor, they're more likely to believe it than if it is introduced without humor, which brings us to the point that humor does make sense when you're talking about climate change. Then there is a recent research on the impact of humor on climate change by Skurka and colleagues in 2018, where they say that a satirical weather report. I actually have the report with me. I can share this with you. A satirical weather report was more likely to indicate an intention to engage in activism, and it is likely to make people feel that I am responsible and I will express my responsibility by doing something to stop climate change. So they can become a member of a climate advocacy organization, or they can go to meet officials and ask for climate positive policies. So this is what Skurka and colleagues have talked about. And Bohr and Wade, they found in a study that was conducted in 2014 that viewing a satirical play about climate change can promote active and positive engagement with the issue debate, and it can encourage audience members to look at what they are doing wrong in their lives, and they probably will do some correctional behavior. Right. In 2020, Zhang and Pinto talked about how when exposed to climate change memes online, because a lot of people are online a lot of times these days, individual awareness towards climate change can go up. All right, which means that if you are exposed to climate change memes during online interactions or during your stay online, you are more likely to become aware of these issues. All right, so this is again bringing us to how humor can help us talk about climate change. And the last one that I would talk about is Berkoff and Osnes, who tell us that if humor is used for something like climate change communication, then it can help us bring a certain kind of resistance to climate negative behavior or climate negative attitude. It can help enhance positive attitude towards climate protection among the members of the civil society. Right. Okay, so now I would like you to have a look at these pictures from different parts of the world. This is a group of young professional dancers in animal costumes. They were performing outside
अभ्यास है तो मतलब बहुत हो रहा है कल ओजोन देखो 2 किलो कम थियो ना 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 तो देखो ओजोन केते किलो कम चारि वाला बहुत पतला 2 किलो कम ହେଇଥିଲା हां ମୁଁ ସପ୍ତାହ ପରେ जो କରିଥିଲି
68 I think somebody's mic is unmuted.
देखो केते किलो निश्चय कम थियो
Okay, let me just move on. And then we have This is a Greenpeace protest in 2010 that talks about the drowning of some of the most iconic structures from around the world. You can see Taj Mahal here. You can see the Pyramid of Giza. You can see the Big Ben. You can see the Eiffel Tower. The Christ from Brazil. You can see the Sydney of Liberty for this going down, and this is a picture from the environmental activism that was being done on the streets of Denmark in 2020 when world leaders arrived for a climate summit. There, some pictures for you, and then this is from India. This is in September 2019 as part of worldwide demonstrations before the UN summit in New York. So the lady in the picture is carrying a a poster. This earth is getting hotter than my imaginary boyfriend. This is a humorous take on climate change. Some fiction that I can now draw your attention to is My Days of Dark Green Euphoria by A.E. Copenhaver. It's a very recent book, and this is a book that talks about a situation where this young protagonist, 30-year-old young woman, is in a state of eco neuroticism. So she's almost neurotic. She's eco anxious. So she has never met her 6 nephews who live in another part of the country, because she doesn't fly, and she doesn't fly domestic, and she doesn't fly international ever. Her whole idea of life is to minimize her carbon footprint to a level that nobody ever gets to know that she lived. And she has a boyfriend who kills a spider, and because he kills a spider, she reconsiders her relationship with him. It's a funny book, and it talks about how things can go bad from here if we are not looking at keeping the climate happier. And then by Ian McEwan, this very popular British writer. His book that was published in 2010 by the name Solar. So this is a book where Michael Baird is a physicist, and he has won a Nobel Prize. But that's not that's not really an achievement, because he has also a crumbling private life. He has a professional life, the best of which is already over. So he's just making money off his reputation. And then his 5th marriage is crumbling. His wife is having an affair. This 5th one is having an affair, unlike the other 4 where he used to have an affair and break the hearts of the women. And then how he half-heartedly is taking an initiative to stop global warming, and he's not very keen to do it till things turn topsy-turvy, and everything is out of control. There is this beautiful book, the Stud book by Monica Drake, that appeared in 2013. It talks about motherhood. It's almost encyclopedic in its description of motherhood. Different kinds of mother. There are 4 women, and there are struggles with struggles or relationships with reproduction, and how each of them is a different kind of mother, and how each of them has a different relationship with the whole idea of reproduction, and how this has a link to climate change. One of the women in the story is a zookeeper, and her job is to ensure that the endangered species actually go about it, that they reproduce, and how she struggles in her own life to have a child. Right. Then The Back of the Turtle by Thomas King, a brilliant book which talks about oil spills and seawater pollution, and how the indigenous community across the USA and Canada are getting affected by by this insensitive corporate edition of their resources, and everything told in with a real good pinch of humor. All right. And Majanande from Norway, who talks about the history of bees. Now, this is a very interesting book. This is a very interesting book that talks about, three different eras in three different eras in three different countries. So, the distant future China, 2098 China, and then I think 1852 England, and about current United States, I think 2007 United States. So, and how the survival of bees is integral to the survival of human beings, and how he told it. The whole thing is told with a funny bent. So it's a very enjoyable book, and a very very uncomfortable one as well, because you know that this is something happening in front of your eyes, and you cannot do anything about stopping the planet from going to waste. Then I also would recommend Mermaids in Paris by Lydia Millet, where this beautiful book is a very sincere book, and it's humorous, and it is telling you about a very smart bride, Dave, who focuses on how things can change when life throws at you the challenge of climate change. So these are books that you can actually read and have fun, and you can also know that climate change can be talked about from the lens of humor. All right, so these are the books that I would recommend you reading. There are many more, but I just thought that for the paucity of time, that we probably would do well to just start with. You can have these 6 books in mind, and this would be nice to go about it. So now let me go to also share some of the videos, especially the weather girl, the weather girl that was very very. I hope that I'm still sharing screen. So let me go to this one, and I hope that
it's the Labor Day weekend.
Is the audio? Can you hear the audio?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Last chance to lounge by that pool and wrap up your summer reading list. Pippa's standing by with the full forecast. Pippa, looks like that nice warm weather isn't quite ready to leave.
I don't know why you would imagine that it would. We've broken thousands of temperature records across the country and the planet this year. In fact, we're heading into the 329th consecutive month with a global temperature above the 20th century average.
Definitely time to light up that barbecue.
Yes, the barbecue.
Pippa, I think the folks at home are probably about ready for that 7-day forecast.
Okay, sure. Let's start up north, way up north. This week, satellites measured the smallest area of Arctic sea ice coverage in recorded history. That's 4 million square kilometers of ice missing since the 1980s. Where did it go? That's bigger than India. And it's happening so quickly, some researchers are now forecasting a summer with no ice in the Arctic Ocean within 10 years. So instead of a bright white sheet reflecting sunlight back into space, that means dark water sucking up even more heat, making it melt faster and faster. Most scientists prefer the friendlier term of feedback loop, but I'm more inclined to call it what it is, an inescapable death spiral.
I think there's a feedback loop in my earpiece, because I believe I just heard myself ask you for the weather report.
This is the weather report. This is what's happening. Scientists are telling us we can put 565 more gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere before global temperatures rise by 2 degrees, which is universally accepted as the threshold of total mayhem. Except if you add up the proven reserves of fossil fuels controlled by the world's energy companies, the oil and gas and coal we currently plan to burn, that amount is 5 times the safe limit. So if you think it's bad now, you just wait and see what hell we're going to unleash once we start drilling under the Arctic and digging up the tar sands so you can try greenwashing an ice cap. You think all of this extreme weather is a coincidence? You want the weather report? This is a reality report!
right. So let me go back to the slides. Okay. So these are that was a snippet of the very popular The Weather Girl Gone Rogue video, which is has almost become a classic now when we talk about climate change humor. And these are some of the books that I had in mind to talk about. So this is it. We have come to the end of the discussion. These are some of my references for your information. And thank you. If you have any questions, you are most welcome to ask. And I would also like to give a special thanks to Khan for bringing us together. So thank you. And over to you, Dr. Jaina, and your team for any questions if you want to ask. So, Dr. Jaina, we have come to the end of the discussion. If there are any questions, and if there is anything that any feedback, any observation, any comments, I would like to, get it from you. So should I just leave? I see WHSMC. Should I just leave? So, Dr. Jaina, should I just leave because I'm not getting any questions?
No, madam. Thank you so much, madam, for your excellent presentation. And at the outset, you are highlight so many issues, in particular 21st century life world, which has been treated very much not well aware and informed in particular human context. I will have two more queries. I will know when you were talked about green humor and climate crisis, climate change, all these in a very semitical way of literature context. I would like to know two things, madam. What is your concerns about Adivasi epistemology as concerned? The first, in terms of literary critique or literature as concerns in 21st century life world. And second, in the Anthropocene era, and Cardiac Ilson and Chandi and Mohan, these people all were aware about what crisis we are going to meet in 2047 Indian context and what globe is now facing today. In particular, the scenes which you rightly mentioned and talked, your video is showing very nicely how these anchors are so worried in a funny way. This is not a funny kind of thing, but people should aware about, and people should think seriously through the post-pandemic life world is concerned. Everybody saying Corona is a gift of LPG, if I am not wrong. the liberalization, the privatization, and the globalization context. But global politics is saying different. When people are talking about globalism, it's far behind to understand, in particular, the academic worlds. People like you are seriously working on that topic particular, because in academic always we avoid the social issues, not rightly pick out the points and highlight so many things in terms of the public domains. And what is your concerns when we are going to see a different world in coming days? How far is concerned, if you look seriously about the fossil fuels, the decarbonization, the modality of mortality in terms of the transition phase of transportation, and finally, the numbers of climate crisis and climate justice about the phenomenon of social issues is concerned. What is your ideas, madam? And you briefly analysis near about 51 minutes of your talk. So I will need some enhance of your thoughts regarding the issues. Please, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Jinnah, for your observations, and thank you for your queries. So I would just, I'll just bring it to the one central point that I think is very, very integral to what you were working in. If I'm not wrong, it's Center for Adivasi Research and Development. So which means that you are focusing on both the research and development, and you're talking about the indigenous people, the Adivasis, if you look at it from the Indian context. And when we're talking about climate change, and when we're sowing all of these seeds of humor in the climate change narrative, and we are talking about our concerns for climate change, the one thing that we must remember is, if climate change is going to change the lives of some communities irrevocably, it is the indigenous people, it is the Adivasis, because more than us, it is the indigenous, the Adivasis that have lived with integrity in nature, with nature, and they are what you would say the primary stakeholders of the natural world. All right. So the harmony that they had with nature, the harmony that they had with the planet, has been broken because of our brutal acts, because of what is considered the mainstream's brutal acts. So they are paying a heavier price for our sins. And that is something of concern. That is something that we should be concerned about. That is something that we should focus on, minimizing. At least from now onwards, we should think about how to go and live life so that we are not negating the possibility of life for our Adivasi brotherhood, Adivasi brothers and sisters. Because once that life is lost, it's never going to come back. And that is going to be a loss that is going to be permanent. And any kind of loss that is permanent in nature can never be, fully compensated, no matter what you do, no matter what policies you come up with, no matter what ideas you try to implement in terms of making the world a better place. If we are not stopping climate change now, we are doing irreparable damage to the indigenous peoples across the world, both in India and anywhere, wherever people are. The other day I was reading an article about the Sami people in Norway and how they're losing their way of life because there are no more, the reindeer is now almost extinct. It's an endangered species, and every single way of life, every single ritual of the Sami people was dependent on the reindeer. If you look at I lived for the longest time of my childhood, I was in Koraput. I lived in Koraput for a long period of my childhood, and the Koraput that was then, the Koraput that is now, are very different places. And irrespective of the idea of progress, we must value the indigenous way of life, and we must value the traditions and the rituals and the customs of the indigenous peoples, and we should try to ensure that we live a life that does not damage theirs, that does not damage their way of looking at the world and their way of living here. So I hope that that made some sense. Did it make sense?
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. And madam, in terms of, you rightly picked out the Adivasi and the indigenous community is concerned. If you look the serious theories, you are highlighting so much theories in particular post-colonial, so much theories on particular climate change and climate justice is concerned. Because Western people always worried about this climate crisis or climate change. I want to pass some of this data is concerned. 64% people not aware about what is climate change in USA particular, and for 69% in UK, and particular the whole Europe is concerned about what is the meaning of actual climate change, because people not bothering about all these serious issues or serious phenomena of those plethora of thoughts. And in India, I quite sure and very much well aware about 91% people not know what is climate change. When tsunami came, people thought about this climate crisis. In Odisha context, you know better than me how many people are very much serious about climate crisis in a particular capital oceanic approach. If you look the Niyamgiri movement, people are laughing. If you look the POSCO movement, and once again people are laughing and saying, what kind of climate we are going to face in 21st century's life world? When the Simlipal range buried out, people not well aware about, because people only see the newspaper and television newses, and they are talking about few minutes about the climate crisis, what happened with the people and what happened the living and non-living forces, in particular those are living in forest. People, we are always talking about the living agencies like men and women, about family, society, and these communities is concerned. If you look seriously the theories of Habermas, he always saying one thing about community, corporate, and these particular content. We always lacking the Habermas theory. The content is missing always in Odisha context. What is your ideas, madam? How could you see the reality of Odisha? When coastal belt is going to one of the best reality of Odisha, we must lost so many animals, birds, and long forest is concerned. And when we are talking about climate change, what happened with this particular the debate is going on when these policy activists and these policy makers, those are not well aware about concerns about climate change. Your answer, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Jaina. So yes, so when you're talking about Odisha, I would, because you talked about the capital scene and the Anthropocene, I would like to bring your attention to what Rob Nixon mentioned as the slow violence. All right, so the slow violence is a concept that is probably very fitting when we're talking about the Odisha coastline and the forests. It's slow violence is something that, it's like it's a killer machine, but on the slow motion. So it kills, and it kills slowly. So you don't realize that it is being killed. You don't realize, you don't get aware, you don't see the threat, and it is done. You don't see the threat, and you don't prepare yourself for the violence, but the violence occurs, and it occurs over a period of time. So you're not sure that you witness it the way you would have. But if you talk about, even something as simple as going to because it home for me, having to the numbers are going down every year, and statistics, if you statistics are startling. It is almost imminent to know that we are living dangerously, and that you talked about, the human, but it's the human as well as the non-human. Why do we need to focus only? Why are we not talking about the non-human? Time there is a forest that's somewhere. Every time there are trees that are cut to make roads. Turns down the ecological disaster part from its concerns. We are causing damage to the non-human world as well. We are causing damage to the way we knew the world. The biodiversity of Odisha has been compromised a lot. And what more evidence do we have? The other day, I was reading about, when we were younger, when we were children, sparrows were everywhere. The house sparrows were everywhere. Now sparrows have become almost an endangered species. So this is a concern that not you and me, we cannot solve it. We can talk about it probably, but it has to come from a community sense. So the whole community has to become aware. The whole community has to work towards making the world a greener planet, making the world a better place to live, making the world feel about our own environment. Unless we start a symbiotic relationship that we have already with the environment, and unless we respect, we are not going to be good. So that also reminds me of what Haraway talks about, in companion species, talks about, Donna Haraway talks about how the non-human also has a very, very important role to play in human society, and how we keep on negating that idea. But yes, that also reminds me of Haraway's idea of the companion species. So for every single damage that is done to our coast, it is probably because we wanted to flourish a bit professionally somewhere. We wanted to flourish a bit in the mainstream somewhere. So all these minor private goals need to be compromised if we want the planet to become a happy planet again. If we want to save for the fear of God, we should work towards a greener life, more sustainable, and we should adopt more sustainable lifestyles. And we should just come out of our own self-deceptions that it's not going to hurt me. It's not a tragedy that's coming to hit me. That part we have to be concerned about. We should not be negating it. If we do, then we are doing it at our own cost, and we are compromising the world for our own children. We are leaving a world that's not going to be nice for our own children. So for the sake of our own selves, for the sake of our own communities, our own children, our own families, we should work towards a greater planet. Thank you. And I hope that I could make some sense, and that I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, madam, for wonderful answers.
Thank you.
I will wind up this session with saying few words, madam. When we are contesting and conceptualizing this global platform of global dialogue, mapping mind series of 21st century life world, when we are going to talk about one of the most serious planetary question like climate change or anthropocenic or capitalistic idea, I will urge the universities, those are working in universities not as a fraternity, not as a faculty, as a human, they will most aware about all these serious discussions, and they will part and parcel of this and think seriously about, you rightly mentioned, for their children or for their forthcoming youngsters as concerned. When we are talking about this particular phenomenon of this seminal way of thinking, we must aware about the global solidarity, habitability and sustainability kind of things. We need a self-belongingness of kind of thought to answer and to pinning these ideas into the planetary question. When we are going to see a new world, the buzzword new world means a post-human or particular the digital humanity is concerned, because we are always in a idea of technically driven society, which is more driven technology based in terms of these ideas of climate change or every concerns well about the information, because we are in a fast information world, which is many informations always rapid fire kind of rounds. Thank you so much, madam, for accepting our invitation and spoke very well about the one of the important aspect of this contemporary world, which is facing today, the grim humor. One of most important idea of yours, you said with the global audience is concerned. And thank you so much for all institution partners. And those are watching us in YouTube and Facebook. Please feel free to write us to making us better in coming days. And thank you so much, madam. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Thank you, the audience, and thank you, our host institutions. And thank you, all of us. Those are tightly engaged with your ideas and your time to make it a grand success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jena. May I now leave? Thank you so
Yes,
much.
yes, madam. Thank you so much. Meeting is concluded now. Thank you.